Welcome to this webinar of the Jerusalem Press Club, JPC, another one in the series telling you how, while fighting the coronavirus, Israel is alive and kicking. And today we host Fleur Hassan-Nahum, Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, who will speak about the challenges of quarantine in the Jerusalem neighborhood. Fleur Hassan-Nahum is in charge of foreign relations and international economic development and tourism in our capital. She studied and practiced law in London, immigrated to Israel in 2001, and in 2013 she joined and later led the Yerushalayim Party, which seeks to turn Jerusalem into a more pluralistic and open society. Ms. Hassan-Nahum will start with a short introduction, and then we'll open up for Q&A. You are on mute, so please type your questions on chat. She'll answer them. Either she reads them or I will read them. We'll see how it goes. I want to thank Israel Tal, the spokesman of the city of Jerusalem, and our colleagues at the Jerusalem Press Club for facilitating this session. Ms. Hassan-Nahum, please.
Hi, good morning. We are very proud, actually, of all the amazing work that we've been doing over the last month in very, very difficult circumstances. The Mayor of Jerusalem has led a very impressive campaign on the humanitarian side, on the logistical side, and everything that he's done, I believe he's done with a lot of sensitivity to a very, very delicate issues in a very delicate city, as you all know. So I'm going to give a little background about why Jerusalem is challenging to begin with, and then we're going to go into what we've done in order to overcome and try and get over this terrible coronavirus. So as many of you already know, Jerusalem is the largest city in the country. It's also, unfortunately, the poorest city in the country. And the reason that it's the poorest city in the country is because two of the weakest or poorest socioeconomic groups in the country live in their largest numbers in our city. 37% of our city has our Arab community, and 25% of our city is ultra-Orthodox. Our city is over 920,000 people. Country is Tel Aviv with 500,000 people. So we're double the next largest city in the country. So this already starts with a very challenging situation. The challenge is that, of course, both ultra-Orthodox community and the Arab community live way under the poverty line, between 50, 60, 70%. And so any crisis like this exacerbates anything that we already are facing on a day-to-day. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, first of all, what we've done for the humanitarian operations. And we'll talk a little bit about what we've done logistically. And again, I have to say that in these days, in these very delicate days, I'm very happy that the Mayor of Jerusalem is somebody with a lot of managerial experience and somebody who believes that every different group in the city deserves their own different sensitive response, and I believe he's been doing it with a lot of sensitivity. So let's start a little bit with the humanitarian operations. Since the beginning of this crisis, we set up an amazingly impressive volunteer army of organizations under the city, under the Department of Volunteerism in the city. And this huge operation is making sure that there's not one elderly person in the city alone, and there's not one elderly person in the city hungry. We're also doing the same thing for families, with a special emphasis on families with special needs kids. We have 6,000 families like that in the city. And also, of course, with the families that have now been pushed into poverty by this crisis. Now, you have to understand that Jerusalem is our economy is very service-oriented and very tourism-oriented. And so our economy has almost, in all of those industries is crashing, because We are very heavily based. Now, for 7 years, we've been trying to bring more technological jobs in the city, and we've brought more and more every year, but it's not enough because our economy is still very much tourist and service industry based. And so not only do you have the people who are regularly on the welfare lists that we take care of all the time, that has grown exponentially to all the people who now find themselves unemployed with zero income. Just to give you an example, in the last week, in 1 week, we distributed 17,000 food packages. The city distributed 17,000 food packages, of course, with all our partners in the field, all the nonprofit organizations. Now, this is being done across the city. Jews, Arabs, Christians, whoever needs, whoever either is on a welfare list, whoever has dialed 106, which is our hotline in the city, and whoever puts themselves or describes themselves as needed, that person, that family will go on a list and they will get either a dried food packages or cooked meals or both. The mayor at the beginning of this crisis assigned a volunteer per elderly person so that they won't feel alone, so that they have an advocate to deal with any need that they may have. And it's not about money. Sometimes it's about picking up medicine. It's about being on the phone with them every day to make sure that nobody feels alone. And the mayor assigned one volunteer per elderly person, and he also assigned a volunteer for every special needs family. Special needs families are particularly vulnerable because we're talking about very challenging kids who are normally in some type of framework until 6 o'clock at night. So not only do we have the difficulty of these kids now being home all day with parents who have to actually deal with them all day, but they also have the issue that a third of those special needs families are under the poverty line. So we have a lot of complications with a lot of delicate situations. Now, if we look at the different communities, we have, as I said, 25% ultra-Orthodox, 37% Arab community, and this makes the trying to control the virus complicated because of their living conditions. So let's look at the Haredim. The ultra-Orthodox live in very, very small, crowded accommodation. They live in 60, 70 square meter apartments, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids. And so in general, that type of overcrowdedness is going to make the situation much worse, even if they're all staying at home. And it's the same with the Arab community. So the Arab community live in less cramped, crowded conditions, but they live big numbers of families. They live all the brothers with all their kids. That's the cultural setup of East Jerusalem, of the Arab community of Jerusalem. And so the fact that the cultural way of living in both these communities makes the spread of the virus much, much easier and makes our challenge even bigger. And so that's logistically what we're dealing with in a city which is already complicated at the best of times. So I'll give you a little bit now of an outline of how we've managed to split the city up in terms of neighborhoods which are green neighborhoods and neighborhoods which are red neighborhoods. So the green neighborhoods and the red neighborhoods, this is something that the Ministry of Health have defined as problematic neighborhoods. So what is a problematic neighborhood? And I know that it's very easy to get into the cultural, finger pointing, Haredim, Arabs, but we don't want to go there. This is very simple mathematics. And the mathematics are like this. Any neighborhood that has 1 in 1,000 or more people with corona is considered a problematic neighborhood. That's the definition. It's purely mathematical. And so the problematic neighborhoods are those neighborhoods that have a higher incidence of corona than other neighborhoods. And in these neighborhoods, of course, as you've all heard in the press, we are limiting movement because we don't want that to go on to other neighborhoods. But much more importantly, our policy is based around splitting the healthy people from the sick people. And so what we need to do, 3 stages. Firstly, we have to identify who's sick. And so in that vein, we've opened up 2 drive-in centers, drive-in testing centers with MADA, with the Ministry of Health, one in the Teddy area in the sports, near the sports arena, and the other one in Jabal Mukaber for the Arab community of Jerusalem. So first of all, we have to test. Now, on top of all the drive-in, we also have opened different clinics that will also be doing testing, walk-in clinics, not just drive-in clinics, and we've increased those. So the first challenge is testing people. Now, I just want to give you an example. Since last Thursday, since last week when we opened the drive-in in Jabal Mukaber, every day the number of tests have gone up. The first day, just as we set up, we had 300. It kept going up, 300, 400. The Arab community want to get tested. They are coming. And to that vein also, we've opened up a number of walk-in test places, also over the wall in Kfar Akab and in Shuafat refugee camp, as well as in the rest of the city. Once we've identified who's sick, and because of the sensitivity and of the cultural living conditions of these 2 populations, our aim is to take out the sick from the healthy. You have to understand, when you're living in a 70-meter apartment and you have to go into isolation, it's not going to happen when you have 7 kids. You need your own bathroom, you need your own room. That is not going to be able to happen in the ultra-Orthodox community, for example. And so what we have to do is separate the sick from the healthy. And so the mayor has set up an amazing initiative, I think the only one in the country, where he set up a call center and a ground zero headquarters in the city in order to call up. We have people from every different population on the phones convincing the sick to be able to pull them out and put them in one of the 5 hotels that we have taken over, us with the Ministry of Health and the Defense Ministry. We've taken over the hotels in order to be able to put the sick people who cannot physically because of their living conditions. And so the first day it was 30, 40, up till now we've had 200 people, which is really a significant number that we've managed to pull out of their neighborhoods in order to put them in isolation in these hotels, and in order for them to be able to get better and heal without the danger of infecting the rest of their family. This is an initiative of Mayor Leon, which I believe is going to be proven very, very pragmatic, given the circumstances of the populations in Jerusalem. Now, I just want to share a lovely story before we open this up for questions.
Okay.
A lot has been said about the Arabs and Jews and collaboration and you know, and a lot of has been made about the divisions of our city. But I just want to finish with a note that what we're seeing on the ground is that this terrible virus has actually brought a lot of collaboration, a lot of cooperation, and a lot of unity between the different populations in our city. We've seen it on the welfare department, which is serving everybody in our city. We have brought in Arab NGOs to be able to do our work on the ground, the way that we brought in Jewish NGOs and ultra-Orthodox NGOs. And we're seeing some really beautiful scenes of unity in facing this terrible crisis. And I just want to throw one story, which I heard about yesterday. We have Intel, you know, big high-tech company in the city, as well as some other smaller startup companies who've come up with a way of 3D printing protective wear. We are now 3D printing protective wear, and the first recipients of our 3D printing masks and other equipment have been the 3 hospitals in East Jerusalem, because they were sorely lacking equipment. The mayor wrote a week and a half ago to the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Defense that he's please asking for more equipment for East Jerusalem hospitals, and we have started 3D printing equipment for East Jerusalem hospitals. So I think that story illustrates, the innovation that we have in our city and the camaraderie that we have in our city, and the fact that today we're all working together facing one common enemy. Because this enemy has no borders and no discrimination between religions and people, and everybody has understood that.
Okay, thank you very much, Fleur. You praised the mayor for handling the situation nicely, but we saw him on television voicing a strong opposition to splitting the city into neighborhoods. So why can you elaborate on that?
So I'll start 3 weeks ago when the government wanted to close the checkpoint at Shuafat, between Shuafat and Shuafat refugee camp. And the mayor was the first to say, we're not splitting the city into two, Arabs and Jews. And he stood his ground, and it didn't happen. He really worked very hard for that not to happen. In the same vein, when the whole world started incriminating the Haredi community, the ultra-Orthodox community, he said the same thing. We're not splitting the city. Now, what we have today is not a split of the city. What we have today is limiting movements in problematic neighborhoods where the criteria is more than 1 in 1,000 people who have the virus. And so there's a difference between splitting the city and saying, oh, let's put the Arabs over there, let's put the Haredim over here, and isolating or limiting the movement of problematic neighborhoods for the virus not to spread. And the mayor from the beginning has been saying, I'm not splitting my city. And now of course, because of the health ministry criteria, 1 in 1,000, we are segregating, we are limiting the movement of those problematic neighborhoods. There's a difference.
Without finger pointing and stigmatizing, etc., but there's still cultural differences in which the Haredi, for example, and also the Arabs are complying with the regulations, with the orders. I mean, so there's no way in to avoid such a I would say treatment, differential treatment with communities who act differently than needed.
I agree with you, Uri, but the segregation should come from the numbers and not from the nature of the community. We shouldn't say we're closing in Arabs because we're Arabs, and we shouldn't say we're closing in Haredim because they're Haredim. We should say, okay, what is happening in this neighborhood? What are the numbers? Why is it high? And this is the way that we're going to limit its movement. And of course, you're right. These two, and I said from the beginning, these two populations are problematic because of the way that they live, because of the overcrowdedness. Unfortunately, in the Haredi community, the leaders didn't react as fast as they should have, although in Jerusalem, the mayor has been working very hard to talk to those leaders and to ensure we even have halachic Jewish law rulings where the rabbis are saying, if you need to leave your house on Shabbat in an ambulance, you have to leave your house on Shabbat in an ambulance. And this is what the mayor has achieved. It's been very, very tough. I agree with you that these communities have built-in problems, but we should deal with their problems from the perspective of trying to deal with them as we find them, and not throwing blame, but understanding that there are certain sensitivities that we have to be dealing with. And that's why I believe the mayor has been very sensitive in that sense.
How much do we know about what's going on in East Jerusalem? And
so this is a great question.
And are the hospitals there adequately equipped to deal with this?
So in East Jerusalem, we opened up the test center a week and a half ago. We've opened up another 3 or 4 walk-in centers. And so the big challenge in East Jerusalem has been getting the message out, of course, in Arabic, of course, trying to find their own leaders and influencers to get the message out. Dealing with the cultural with the cultural fact that these communities live in big families. They live in bigger accommodation than the ultra-Orthodox, but they live in big chamulot and big families. And so we will have to also isolate. But the biggest challenge there has been getting everybody to, getting as many people as we can tested. Many people want to get tested. The drive-in has been a success.
Do you have any numbers? Do you have any numbers? How many people?
We only have the numbers of numbers of people who've been tested, and we see that it started with 300 a day in East Jerusalem, and the numbers going up every single day. And the numbers still appear to be low. Everybody said, oh, this week it's going to explode. We haven't seen a huge explosion, but we're seeing more and more testing, and the more testing we have, of course, the more the numbers are going to go up. And we have hotels also in place in East Jerusalem in order to take out the sick and put them in with in the Corona hotels. And yes, the equipment in East Jerusalem, I mentioned this earlier, the mayor sent out an emergency letter to the authorities asking and begging for extra equipment, which are sorely lacking in the hospitals in East Jerusalem. And as a result of that, our ingenuity went into gear, and we started printing protective wear and masks in Jerusalem with a high-tech community in order to provide equipment. And if anybody is interested in that particular story in more depth, I'm happy to elaborate or to actually get a story, to tell you all the details of that story.
What's the general number of people infected in Jerusalem? And there's a question, what's the rate of the ultra-Orthodox in this?
So again, we will, the numbers are moving every day. So I can get an updated number. I can, get an updated number hopefully by the end of today. But the numbers that I have from 3 days ago are not relevant today. And so I can try and get that information a little bit later.
Okay, please do. We saw in Bnei Brak the army going in. Nothing of the sort in Jerusalem yet. Is there any involvement of the Homeland Command or the army, or that you are aware of?
No, the army is already, helping us, and the Home Front Command is already involved. They're distributing food packages in the different neighborhoods in the city, and so it's a joint effort with all the human resources that we have. My husband, for example, is an army dentist, and he was called up to work in a hospital, just to give you an example. So his Miluim is now in Shaare Zedek. So I know the army is being called up.
Everybody is talking about exit strategy. It seems that in Jerusalem it will be more complicated than in the rest of the country because we're not sure that the disease is behind us, or we're even seen the beginning of the end. So how do you foresee the Jerusalem coming out of this?
So I have to say that from the beginning of the crisis, I'll talk economics for a second, and then we'll talk about the logistical exit strategy. For a month and a half already, the city have had a number of measures in place to help small businesses, starting from loans, virtual malls, encouraging people to buy local. We have an amazing volunteer army of Hebrew University students building websites for free for small businesses and trying to make businesses in general more resilient. We're also leading, along with the mayor, I'm leading hopefully a recovery fund that will come into play the day after, so that we can help all those businesses get back on their feet. It's not a small thing, because the long-term effects of this could be devastating for our city. And so we're putting in place all sorts of economic measures to wave the storm at the moment and for recovery the day after. And we are amongst the first cities to think in that sense in terms of economic recovery. In terms of the logistical recovery, look, I think that everybody agrees that the idea was of all these measures not to put pressure on our health services. And so even if a lot of people are going to get this, for people not to get it at once. And I think that in that sense, we've succeeded. I think we're in for another a few bumpy months. Like I said earlier, in the Arab community of Jerusalem, we may not be aware yet of the numbers, and so that might be a second wave. An added, very difficult challenge is going to be, how do we manage Ramadan, which is a couple of weeks away, and is that going to be in the Arab community what Purim was in the Jewish community? That's going to launch a whole other lot of infections. And so there's still a lot of challenges and difficulties ahead before we talk about a real exit strategy. I think we're still at the point of waiting the storm, especially with our challenging communities in our city. And so maybe in a week or two, I'll be able to answer that question best. At the point, the exit strategy that we're managing is an economic one, and that's the only thing that we can do at the moment until we understand the scope of the people who are going to be getting sick in our city.
Surely tourism will be affected in the harshest way.
Tourism is I mean, I hold the tourism portfolio, and we are at the moment setting up a day after a thinking group, because tourism will be the last thing to recover. It'll be the last thing to recover. Flights will be the last thing to go back to normal in the whole world. We had the best tourism year in 2019, and unfortunately we've gone from the best year to what will be the worst year, and this affects every type of business in our city, because our city, like I said earlier, is very service oriented around restaurants, and cultural places. And yesterday I got a call from a company of tourist buses and bus drivers. We need to employ all these people. We need to find ways of ensuring that thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are dependent on the tourism industry for their everyday work and now have alternative work. And this is something that we will have to think about very seriously once we get out of the storm of the sickness of people.
If you think about the bright side, people are saying that once the coronavirus crisis is over, people will start pilgrimage to holy places, maybe thinking about that.
Yes and no, because yes and no, because people will have less money. So it will affect the overall tourism. This will take us a while to recover. And so it's my opinion, and I'm glad the mayor also has the opinion that we need to make our economy more resilient. And we need to make our economy, we need to think of other virtual ways of ensuring that people have an income. And this is something that we're going to be start to think about very seriously very soon.
You mentioned in the beginning that Jerusalem is the poorest city in the country, and surely this crisis will make it even poorer because of because of the dependence on services and lack of industry. So maybe Jerusalem will need a national bailout strategy after the crisis.
On an average year, our mayor gets a lot of help from the national government. We're lucky that he has those types of connections and relationships with the government. Last year, for example, the mayor got an extra $1 billion shekels for us to be able to develop the city. That is on a good year. So you can imagine what type of economic help we're going to be needing now that we've had a year that not only has seen the two poorest populations in the country, which are in our largest populations in our city, being flung into this because of their cultural setup, but also the city in the country with the largest income from tourism set back in their income. So Jerusalem is in a very difficult situation, but like I said, there's a lot of goodwill. We've seen a lot of people. I've seen acts of kindness in this city over the last month that I've never seen. We have a lot of goodwill from all the communities in our city. Jews, Arabs, Christians, everybody in our city are pitching in together. And so I believe that with goodwill, with resilience, with a good captain that we have in our Mayor Leon, we'll be able to get through this and hopefully come out stronger.
We're wrapping up with the two quick questions. One, I'm not sure you can answer because I think it's on the national level. Is it possible to pass a law that people don't have to pay rent during the crisis? I don't think it's a city matter, but, and the second question is, somebody asks why people don't wear masks. They see a lot of people in Nachlaot, for example, and not wearing masks. Is there a way to enforce it?
Okay, so I'll talk about the first question first. Look, you can't cancel rent, because when you cancel rent, you're basically depriving somebody else of their income. So that's not really going to solve anything. You know, I know a lot of retired people who live off the rent that they get from this little shop or from this apartment. So canceling rent is not solving any problems, it's exacerbating the problem. What we have done, and this is national, but the mayor of Jerusalem was amongst the first to call for this, is cancel arnona, commercial arnona, for the majority of businesses. That's a huge...
Arnona is city tax.
Arnona is city taxes. So I have to explain, even though arnona is city taxes, arnona is set by the Ministry of Interior. It's not set, the criteria is not set by us, and we deal with the collection and the money comes to the city, but it's all legislated and managed by the Ministry of Interior. Now, for many years, for different things, you know, people are always trying to change the rules of city taxes, make them easier, and nothing has ever shifted. And so it's actually historic, and the mayor led this effort to get the Ministry of Interior to cancel commercial tax for 25% of the year, which means 3 months. And this is what we've been working very hard. Hopefully next week, the criteria for the businesses that will get this is coming out. It's very wide reaching. In other words, we're not going to make it difficult for a business to have a cancellation of a third of the year, which is 3 months of the arnona. Next week, we're hearing it finally, but this is what's going on. And I'm working very hard in order for a lot of the businesses revolving around tourism get or fit into the criteria as well. And that's something that the mayor spearheaded because of his relationships in the government, because of his relationships with the Ministry of Interior. And we're very happy. And this will be a huge, huge relief for hundreds and thousands of businesses. Huge relief.
We're talking about people.
Oh, the second question. I believe that it should be a directive of the Ministry of Health. Look, the Ministry of Health has been very confused about the masks. A month ago, they were saying, no, masks won't help. Today, they're saying masks will help. I think the Ministry of Health has to come out very clearly and say, you don't leave your house without a mask. I don't leave my house without a mask, and I think nobody should. But if it's not a direct directive from the Ministry of Health, the way that other directives are, it's not going to happen. So everybody should be told that masks are compulsory outside the home. The minute that happens, the minute we have the Prime Minister saying that on national TV, I do believe that people will comply. It still hasn't come in into people's everyday habits, but that's something that we have to do. PR, the way that we did PR about lots of other things in this crisis.
A real last question. Will the crisis put a hold on the light rail project?
Funny you should mention that. Yesterday, actually, we came out with the fact that the Blue Line is underway and is moving forward. Look, in general, the mayor has been very careful not to stop any type of construction work that can be done under the directives. Look, a lot of people are still working very hard in our city. Construction continues in many different neighborhoods, and the light rail and our transport infrastructure development is one of those things that is moving forward. So no, there won't be any delays in our transport infrastructural development.
On this happy note, I want to thank you, Fleur Hassan-Nahum, for excellent presentation. Please convey to the mayor our thanks and support. Stay tuned to our next webinar on Thursday. 4 p.m. with political scientist Professor Gidon Lat on the political scene. And in the meantime, stay safe and enjoy the holidays as much as you can. Thank you.